Hello again, I hope you guys are all well. If you've seen some of my other videos, my vloggy videos, you might know that I'm doing a fair bit of running at the moment. I'm shifting from triathlon to ultra marathons. I know, it's not sensible, it's just the way my brain works. Anyway, that means two things. One, I've done a little bit too much tarmac running, so I've got a sore calf. So I thought this week we would talk about the anatomy of the posterior leg, just the posterior leg. And I'll talk about what leg means anatomically as we go through. There's a nerve or two, there's a couple of arteries and veins to go with them. But then there's the layers of muscles, which I think most people get hung up on. But really it's not too bad. You've got a layer of 3 muscles, and then a layer of 4 muscles, which are a bit complicated. But this also leads into the idea that I need your help. I'm going to be running a couple of ultra marathons this year. The first one is going to be a 100-kilometre run, in one day, from Bath, which is a lovely city in the UK, to Cheltenham, which is where I was born. And it's part of the Cotswold Way Challenge, but I need some sponsorship. I'm raising money for a charity for Macmillan Cancer Support, and they support people with cancer, which is something that's quite close to my family. If you wanted to support me, I'll put a link in the notes below to my Just Giving page. That run is going to be at the end of June 2018. So if you're watching this video in 10 years time, don't worry about it. Thank you very much. But otherwise, have a look at the Just Giving page if you're able to and willing to, and you can donate just a little bit, just £1 or £2 would be great. Thank you very much, that's very generous. But now let's have a look at the anatomy of the calf or the posterior leg and see what might be causing me some trouble. Okay, look, so see what we've got here now. This model is a left leg. The reason that's important is because look, here's the big toe here, we call it the great toe. Things related to the big toe or great toe also gets called hallucis. So do you remember the thumb, the pollex, muscles associated with the thumb get called pollicis. The hallux or great toe, muscles associated with that get called hallucis, and we'll meet one of them. But look, this is medial, there's the big toe, this is medial, there's the little toe, this is lateral. So as I turn this model, as I turn this model around, so now we're looking at the posterior leg. That's lateral, that's medial over here. Now the leg, anatomically, in the lower limb we have the hip, the thigh, and then we have the knee, the leg, the ankle and the foot. So anatomically, when we're talking about the leg, we're talking about this region between the knee and the ankle. And like other parts of the limbs, this leg gets compartmentalized by layers of fascia, which gives me the opportunity to just talk about the posterior compartment of the leg. So the calf, this is what we refer to as the calf, isn't it? This calf muscle here. And in fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start superficially, so we'll consider the skin, and we'll go through a few layers, we'll look at the muscles, nerves and artery and vein, and then another layer of muscles. All right? With this model, and with most prosections we look at, of course, the first thing we take away is the skin. Now, if you were to look at somebody's calf, one of the first things you might see would be a vein, which I'm going to add to it, running down the length of it here. Now this vein is a very superficial vein. It comes from the lateral side of the ankle around kind of to the middle of the calf and runs up with the skin, and then it drains into the deeper veins within the popliteal fossa here, posterior to the knee. That vein gets called the small saphenous vein or the short saphenous vein, because its big brother, the great saphenous vein, runs the entire length of the lower limb. This vein here, so it's carrying, blood from superficial structures around here in the foot and that sort of thing. But this vein has got valves in it. So it's one of those veins that sometimes, if the vein starts to get a bit stretched, because veins aren't very good at being stretched, the valves start to break and that sort of thing. This is a vein where you might see varicose veins. So if you see varicose veins in somebody's posterior, in the calf region, then it's probably the short saphenous vein or the small saphenous vein. Same thing, 2 different names. Now the other thing we tend to see running with it, we see a nerve. It's not quite as neat and tidy as that, but again, we've got a nerve very superficial within the skin. This is a cutaneous nerve then. Again, it's coming from the lateral ankle. So it's applying cutaneous innervation from the kind of lateral ankle, lateral foot and that sort of thing. But as we get into the skin up here, we get lots of other cutaneous branches kind of blending with it. That's the sural nerve. But you might, if you're looking at the skin here, find those two structures together, the sural nerve with the vein. And the sural nerve will again dive posteriorly, so it's a branch of, well, it's a branch of the nerves in here. So we've got the popliteal nerve and what have you, which we'll get to when we get deeper, right? But so if we take the skin off, we take the superficial veins away and those cutaneous nerves, then we start to get to the meat of it, to this shape that we recognise. So this is the big muscle of the calf. This is gastrocnemius, and it's got these two heads, gaster from belly, cnem meaning, that's Greek for lower limb, isn't it, leg? So this is a muscle with two heads, and we've got lateral and medial heads of gastrocnemius, and they're attached to the lateral and medial condyles of the femur, so the lateral and medial femoral condyles. So we get these two big muscle bellies. So we've got this big bellied muscle here. So that means it's crossing the knee joint, and then as it descends, we see it forming this very large, very prominent tendon here. This is the calcaneal tendon, because it's going to insert into the calcaneus bone down here, the heel. Also gets called the Achilles tendon. So this is also a big problem in runners, and big problem for me. I've had lots of tears in my Achilles tendon, mostly on the right side, and I've spent a lot of time strengthening my Achilles tendons to avoid that. But this calcaneal tendon then is actually got, it's three muscles more in this kind of more superficial space, all coming together to form this single tendon. So the first muscle is gastrocnemius. The second muscle is here. This is soleus, right? So you can see how where the muscle starts to become tendinous here, where we still have muscle here, this is soleus. Soleus is just crossing the ankle joint. So soleus is coming from the tibia and the fibula, and it's largely these two muscles that are responsible for plantar flexion. So they'll pull on the calcaneus and they'll give plantar flexion. So at the ankle we've got plantar flexion, dorsiflexion, inversion and eversion. These two muscles are very good at plantar flexing. They pull up the calcaneus, at plantar flexing the foot, so standing on tiptoes, right? That's these guys. But because gastrocnemius also crosses the knee joint, it's also a flexor of the knee joint, right? So if that shortens, it's going to bend the knee, it's going to flex the knee. Now you can see, look, here's this little muscle here. Can you see that? It's barely distinguishable, but there's a separate muscle here. This is the third muscle of the three in the superficial layer of the calf. And this is plantaris. And plantaris is a rubbishy little muscle. Got to take this model apart, got to take the hamstrings off, I think, to get to be able to take this apart. Right there, what can we see? Oh yeah, okay, we've got a bit of it on here. Look, there's plantaris there. So it starts off as a reasonable muscle, and then it becomes a tendon, and this tendon runs down into the calcaneal tendon and blends with it. But that's plantaris here, skinny little long muscle running the length of it. So again, plantaris is look, this is lateral. So this is the lateral femoral condyle up here. So again, plantaris is crossing both the knee joint and the ankle joint, but it's a pretty weedy muscle. So those are the three, all right, in that superficial compartment, and they're all innervated by. If I take soleus and gastrocnemius off, look, they're all innervated by this nerve here. So this is the tibial nerve. Now I've taken all this off. Look, what we can see is, this is the sciatic nerve here, the huge, great big sciatic nerve. In life, in cadavers, this nerve is way bigger than this muscle, than this model suggests. The sciatic nerve is a huge, great big nerve, and it's innervating the muscles of the posterior compartment of the thigh, and then everything distal to the knee. But at some point, the sciatic nerve splits into the tibial nerve and the common fibular nerve. And as the common fibular nerve comes out here, it then splits into superficial and deep fibular nerves. You can interchange fibula for peroneal. both mean pin, both refer to the bone, the fibula. But the tibial nerve then, look, it runs through the popliteal fossa, and it's running with an artery and a vein, but it's running between that superficial layer of muscles that we've taken off and this deep layer of muscles here that we've yet to explore. And the tibial nerve then is innervating all of these muscles of the posterior leg, all of these muscles of the calf. So that's easy to remember, right? If you hear some background noise, it's because there's actually a lot of teaching going on around me. And any minute now, somebody could burst in through that door. Now the sural nerve, that superficial cutaneous nerve, is a branch of the tibial nerve, and it pops out through that gap there in between the two heads of gastrocnemius to get to the skin. But this is the tibial nerve down here. Now we've taken the calcaneal tendon off, but it's got two bursae. It's got a superficial bursa between the tendon and the skin, and it's got a deep bursa between the tendon and the bone. A lot of movement happens here, so the bursae just allows the tendon to move in a bit of a friction-free, protected environment. But watch out for those. Right, now we've taken that deep layer off. Now we've taken that superficial layer off. Let's have a look at the deep layer of muscles. Now this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated. 1, 2, 3, 4 muscles. These are the 1, 2, 3, 4 muscles of the deep calf, the deep posterior leg. This little guy up here, that's easy, but it's these three which are tricky to remember what's what. And that their tendons are all running medially, all right? Medially around. This is the medial malleolus of the tibia here to get into the foot. So how do we work out which muscle is which? Well, we sort this guy out first. This is popliteus. So this is the popliteal fossa here in the posterior to the knee joint. And popliteus, look, now we've got to consider the bones as well, haven't we? So this is the fibula here. You see the foot there? Fibula, fibula, big bone here, tibia, tibia. So we've got the tibia medially and the fibula laterally. Woo. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at a very short muscle, but it's a bit like the pronator muscles. Remember we've got the pronator and the supinator muscles in the forearm? It's a bit like that. So it's running from the tibia up here, and then remember this is laterally. So it's running to the lateral femoral condyle and also to the lateral meniscus in the knee joint. And what popliteus does really is that when we stand, our knee joint kind of locks a little bit. So it makes standing very easy and very energy efficient for us as bipedal animals standing around all day and wandering and stuff. So what popliteus does is it just pulls on that joint and it just twists it and unlocks it and then allows the knee to flex. So popliteus is considered to be a muscle that helps unlock the knee and begin flexion of the knee. Then the big muscles take over and flex it. So that's popliteus up there. Now what about these three guys? Now, of the three muscles here, we've got one which goes to the big toe. So that's going to be, and it goes underneath, so it's going to flex the big toe, and this is a long muscle, so it's going to be the long flexor of the big toe, so it's flexor hallucis longus. One of the other muscles is going to do a similar thing, but it's going to flex the other toes, the other 4 toes, so that's going to be flexor digitorum longus, because it's flexing the digits. And then the third muscle is, well, do you know tibialis anterior? So tibialis anterior is on the shin, right next to the bone there. If we've got tibialis anterior, then we must have a tibialis posterior. And the third muscle is tibialis posterior. So those are the three muscles we've got to puzzle out. Flexor hallucis longus, flexor digitorum longus, and tibialis posterior, right? So if you could follow the muscle all the way around to the toes, you could work that out. That'd be really easy. We would not be able to do that in a pro section if we dissected more away. But we can't do that here. So here's the trick. Flexor hallucis longus, so the muscle that's going to the big toe, and the big toe's over here, isn't on the same side as the big toe. It's on the other side. So if this is medial, right, if the big toe is here, then this muscle here is going to be flexor hallucis longus because it's on the other side. So it cuts across to the big toe over there. That's how I remember it. Now this muscle here this is going to be flexor digitorum longus. So flexor digitorum longus then is going to come under here. So this is medial, and then it's going to pass around the medial malleolus and go to the other 4 toes, and it's going to cause those toes to flex. So the flexion of the toes is really important to us in the way that we walk and we balance and that sort of thing. If you try and stand on one leg, you'll find without any shoes on, you'll find that your toes get really, really busy. So these muscles are really important in stabilising the foot and the ankle. And because we've worked out what those 2 muscles are, then it's this 3rd muscle here. So if this means that flexor hallucis longus is coming from largely attached to the fibula, whereas flexor digitorum longus is largely attached to the tibia. This means that the muscle in the middle is tibialis posterior, and tibialis posterior then is attached to both the tibia and the fibula and to the interosseous membrane in between, and then that runs around again. These are all running around the medial malleolus here, and tibialis posterior is going to run under the medial side of the foot, and it's going to insert into the medial bones of the foot and ankle, right? Those medial. So we've got the navicular, medial cuneiform, and that sort of thing. It's going to run to a lot of bones there. It's going to run to the proximal parts of the metatarsals and so on. So, you know, it goes to a lot of places. But the important thing is that it runs from the deep calf, so from the tibia and fibula, around the medial malleolus, and it runs into the medial side of the foot. So it's a really, really important muscle for stabilising the foot as well, and it's important in inverting the foot. So if you contract that muscle, it'll invert the foot. When you walk, your feet are, I don't know about you, if you look at the wear pattern on your shoes, but usually the outside edge of your heel is more worn than the inside edge of your heel. So the lateral part of the heel of your shoe is more worn. Because when we walk, it's probably worse in runners, but our foot is a little bit inverted, then we land and we go from inverted to kind of a more neutral position. So muscles like tibialis posterior, which can invert the foot, they're actually eccentrically loaded when we put the foot down when we're running or walking, to support that medial arch of the foot and to control all that. So tibialis posterior is a really important muscle in stabilising the foot. I've had lots of problems with my tibialis posterior muscle from doing lots of running in the past. Nowadays it's strong, but if you find a good person, a good sports therapist or osteopath, somebody who really knows the musculoskeletal anatomy, they'll quickly work out the pain around here is caused by one of these muscles. So I've got sore ankles, I've got soreness in my calf, but that soreness isn't caused by me flexing my big toe. It's not caused by me flexing my my other toes. It's not really caused by if I try to lower myself onto an inverted foot, or if I try to invert my foot. So I don't think any of these deep muscles are responsible for the soreness. I think it's soleus that's sore, because the soreness is down here, whereas gastrocnemius is up here, and the soreness is most notable when I'm plantar flexing my foot, or if I'm lowering myself, so going from a plantar flexed foot to a flat foot, so as I'm lowering myself to the ground, coming down some stairs. So soleus is the problem. I've overused soleus. Soleus gets used quite a lot for running and walking, particularly running slowly and that sort of thing. Gastrocnemius is a really powerful muscle. So foam roller, stretch soleus, stretch all these muscles, bit of ice, bit of warmth. I'll be fine. I'll be banging out some big mileage again next week. This week's an easy mileage week anyway. So now if I put the other belly of gastrocnemius back on, so this is the medial head, the medial belly, lateral belly. The other structures to talk about here, if I take this off, are the arteries. There are veins here as well. There are deep veins in the lower limb. Of course, we know about deep vein thrombosis. If you sat around for too long, the muscles which help send the venous blood back to your pelvis don't work, so there's a risk of getting blood clots in your deep veins. Anywho, if we look at the arteries first, right, so at this point, this is the popliteal artery, and it's come from the femoral artery. Popliteal artery, as it runs through the popliteal fossa, it's giving off some collateral branches here to the knee. But as it descends down here, it first branches here. Yeah, so there's a first branch there, and there's a second branch there. And what's happening here is that this first branch is the anterior tibial artery, and that's going to pass to the anterior compartment of the leg, so the shin. And we'll talk about the anterior compartment another day and what's in there. Now this branch here, this second branch, this is going to be the fibular artery. So this is going laterally, kind of to the lateral compartment, to the fibular bone and the fibular muscles and that sort of thing. And then this here, this becomes the posterior tibial artery. So while this is the tibial nerve, this is the posterior tibial artery. So this little segment in between, right, this is the bit that's a bit complicated. So the popliteal artery ends here, and it splits to give off the anterior tibial artery and the tibial fibular trunk here, or tibial peroneal trunk, if you prefer peroneal to fibula. And then down here it splits again to where that trunk ends, and it becomes the fibular artery and the posterior tibial artery down here. The posterior tibial artery will then eventually run down here, medially, around the medial malleolus. Look, there's the big toe. So the posterior tibial artery is going to run down here. And I have talked about the arteries of the foot and the lower limb somewhere else. There's a bit more detail somewhere. All right, but there you go. So that's it. So there we go then. That's kind of the pertinent anatomy. We've got tibia, fibula, looking posteriorly here. There's an interosseous membrane. We've got then, the important thing is these four muscles in the deep compartment. We've got our artery, there's a vein, or often actually a pair of veins running with it in that space, and we've got the nerve, the tibial nerve there, and then we add on the three superficial muscles which give us the characteristic shape of the calf, of this shape here, soleus and gastrocnemius. We've worked out it's my soleus that's sore, so I'll be stretching carefully, a little bit of massage, foam roller, light running on soft surfaces, because of course a lot of what these big muscles of plantar flexion do is that as we land, because I run kind of mid-foot, ball of my foot, is that these muscles are absorbing the shock of landing and then like storing it elastically and then giving it some of that back again to make you more efficiently, move more efficiently when you're walking or you're running. Right, so I'm going to look after those guys. Then we've got, of course, over the top there, if you add the skin back on, we've got that cutaneous nerve, the sural nerve, the short saphenous vein as well. And I'm going to putting hamstrings on backwards, that's trickier than it looks. But there we go, that's the anatomy then of the posterior leg, or the calf region. Hopefully, I've demystified it a little bit. You've got an idea of what muscle is what and roughly what they do. All right, it's not as complicated as the forearm, is it? But there's quite a lot in there. Right, good, okay. I'll go and get some miles in, and I'll see you guys next time.